There is a very specific kind of pain that doesn't scream. It waits. It sits in your chest while you stare at a phone that used to light up with their name. It follows you into the kitchen, into the shower, into the middle of the night when your body is exhausted, but your mind is still trying to solve them like a puzzle that must have an answer. You tell yourself you're just being patient. You tell yourself they're scared, triggered, wounded, confused. You tell yourself love is complicated, timing is delicate, people need space. But deep down, what is really haunting you is this. Are they overwhelmed by their feelings? Or are you wasting your life hoping a closed door will become a home? That question changes everything. Because not every avoidant is the same. And this is where so many people lose years of their lives. They meet someone distant, emotionally inconsistent, hard to reach, and they immediately pour meaning into the silence. They call it depth. They call it fear. They call it a soul connection with bad timing. And sometimes, yes, it is true that the person feels more than they know how to handle. But sometimes you are not witnessing emotional overwhelm. You are witnessing emotional unavailability with no intention behind it. And if you don't learn the difference, you will keep bleeding for people who only ever offered you fragments. That is the brutal truth. Some of you are not in love with a person. You are in withdrawal from intermittent hope. That is why it feels so powerful. Because uncertainty is chemically addictive. When someone gives you closeness and then disappears, your nervous system doesn't read that as romance. It reads it as danger mixed with reward. Dopamine spikes in anticipation, not fulfillment. Cortisol rises when contact drops. Your amygdala starts scanning for threat, for signs, for tiny changes in tone, for proof that the bond is still alive. And suddenly, you are not loving from your center anymore. You are orbiting them from your survival system. You call it missing them. Your body calls it activation. This is why you can know, logically, that something feels wrong and still crave them with frightening intensity. Because your mind is trying to make meaning, but your nervous system is trying to get relief. And relief starts to feel like love when you've been starving long enough. So before we talk about the signs this avoidant is different, we have to tear down one dangerous fantasy. Distance does not automatically mean depth. Silence does not automatically mean hidden love. Confusion does not automatically mean complexity. Some people pull away because they care and don't know how to regulate intimacy. And some people pull away because they are simply not choosing you, not building, not brave enough, not available enough, or not interested enough to carry the emotional weight of what this would require. Your job is not to romanticize the difference. Your job is to see it, clearly, without begging your heart to survive on guesses. And yet, there is something even more painful than accepting that the wrong avoidant will keep you starving. It is accepting that the right one may still look avoidant at first. That's what makes this so hard. Because the avoidant who is different does not always arrive warm, expressive, and easy. They may still hesitate. They may still retreat. They may still go quiet when emotions rise too fast. Their nervous system may still associate closeness with pressure, engulfment, loss of control. When intimacy intensifies, their body can flood. Cortisol rises, the chest tightens, the brain starts choosing distance before the heart gets a vote. They do not stop caring. They feel overwhelmed. And if you have ever loved someone like that, You know how devastating it is to be on the receiving end of that confusion. Because from the outside, overwhelm and indifference can look almost identical. But they are not identical, not even close. The difference is not in whether they get scared. The difference is in what they do with the fear. That is where everything splits. And this is the core concept you need to hold on to like a blade in the dark. Non-reactivity. Not coldness, not game playing, not pretending you do not care. Non-reactivity. The ability to stop performing your anxiety in front of someone who has not yet proven they can hold it. Because when you become reactive, when you chase, plead, over-explain, decode, send the long message, ask for clarity for the 5th time, try to prove your softness, your patience, your rare understanding. You do not create intimacy with an avoidant nervous system. You create pressure. And pressure is the very thing that makes them run faster. The wrong avoidant uses your reactivity as an exit. The different avoidant uses your non-reactivity as safety. That is how you tell. Not by how intense the chemistry is. Not by how magnetic the silence feels. Not by the trauma story that makes you want to save them. By what happens when you stop chasing the connection harder than they do. The first sign this one is different is simple, but it changes the entire emotional map. When you pull your energy back, they move toward you. Not because they are playing games, not because they need an ego boost, but because your stillness gives them room to feel what the noise was drowning out. Think about that. A person with avoidant tendencies often experiences intimacy as internal static. They can want you and feel pressure at the same time. They can miss you and resent the intensity at the same time. They can think about you constantly and still avoid reaching out, because reaching out means feeling more. The more they feel, the less in control they feel. And for someone who learned, somewhere early, that closeness is dangerous, dependency is shameful, and vulnerability costs too much, loss of control feels like emotional exposure. So what do? They detach. They distract. They rationalize. They tell themselves they need space, that this is moving too fast, that something is off, that maybe the connection was not that deep after all. But when your energy stops lunging toward them, when your silence is not punishment but peace, something startling happens. Their system stops bracing against your pursuit. The defensive wall has nothing to push against. The noise drops. And in that quiet, their actual feelings become harder to outrun. That is when they notice your absence with clarity. That is when they replay your voice. That is when the bed feels colder. That is when they start checking for you. That is when they feel the weight of what your presence was doing in their life. The wrong avoidant feels relieved when you disappear. The different avoidant feels you more. Not always instantly, not theatrically, but palpably. They lean in. They text. They reappear with substance, not crumbs. They try. Maybe clumsily, maybe later than you wanted, but they try. And that effort matters more than all the chemistry in the world. The second sign this one is different is that after retreat, they reflect. This is rare, and it is everything. Because plenty of people withdraw, plenty of people go cold, vanish for days, re-emerge like nothing happened, and then act confused when you ask for emotional accountability. That is not avoidance evolving. That is avoidance protected. The different avoidant does something else. They may still shut down. They may still need distance when emotions get too loud inside them. But when they come back, they do not return empty. They return aware. They might not use perfect language. They might not suddenly sound like a therapist, but there is a shift. They name what happened. They acknowledge the pullback. They reveal that their silence was not indifference, but dysregulation. They do not make you drag insight out of them with your bare hands. They volunteer it. That is a massive sign, because self-awareness is the bridge between fear and change. Without self-awareness, you are just standing outside someone's locked house, hoping your love will teach them how to open the door. It won't. Love does not regulate someone who refuses to look at their own patterns. Love does not heal someone who keeps outsourcing the emotional cost of their confusion onto you. But when an avoidant person starts reflecting, something profound is happening inside them. Their prefrontal cortex is beginning to come back online after the emotional flood. Instead of letting the amygdala dictate the whole story, they are observing themselves. They are recognizing that the urge to retreat is not always truth. It is pattern. It is protection. It is old wiring. And when a person can see the pattern, they can interrupt it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not all at once, but enough to matter. You will feel the difference. The wrong avoidant makes you feel crazy for noticing the disconnect. The different avoidant makes you feel seen for surviving it. One erases the wound while creating it. The other is disturbed that they caused it at all. That distinction will save you. The third sign this one is different is that your non-reactivity does not make them colder. It makes them braver. This is where the power dynamic begins to flip. And no, not in the shallow way people talk about power, not in the manipulative, performative way, not in the make them obsessed by becoming unavailable nonsense that rots people from the inside. This is deeper. This is what happens when you stop abandoning yourself to maintain access to them. At first, it is quiet. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to force clarity out of fog. You stop rewarding emotional half-presence with full emotional availability. You stop treating potential like commitment. You stop turning your tenderness into a resume. And then, for the first time, they are left alone with the real experience of you not reaching, not fixing, not carrying the emotional momentum for both of you. And that is when fear changes shape. Before, they feared being consumed. Now, they fear losing something real. That shift matters. Because a different avoidant does not just miss the comfort you gave them, they start confronting the cost of remaining defended. They start feeling the ache underneath the numbness. They start noticing how often they have mistaken detachment for control, and how empty that control really is. They start understanding that your steadiness was never pressure, it was presence. And now that presence is no longer guaranteed. That is when they chase. Maybe not loudly, maybe not dramatically, but internally, intensely. They think about what they did not say. They remember the moments they almost let themselves soften. They wonder if you are done this time. They imagine you healing beyond their reach. And that thought unsettles them more than they expected. Because the truth is, avoidance often looks powerful from the outside, but inside, it is usually fear wearing armor. Fear of dependence, fear of disappointment, fear of being known too deeply and then left, fear of needing what they cannot control. So when your energy becomes grounded instead of grasping, you stop feeding the illusion that they can drift forever and still keep your emotional loyalty waiting on the shelf. Now, the loss becomes real. Now your value becomes visible. Now your silence has weight. But here is the warning. Do not misunderstand this moment. The purpose of your non-reactivity is not to trigger pursuit. It is to restore yourself. If you use stillness as a strategy to hook them, you are still trapped. You are still organizing your worth around their response. You are still making them the center of the story. And that is how the pattern returns. Because if they do come closer, and you instantly collapse back into overgiving, over-accommodating, over-understanding, then you teach them that a little effort buys full access to you again. You break your own pattern right at the edge of your freedom. Do not do that. If they return, let them meet a version of you that is warm but not waiting, open but not unguarded, caring but no longer self-abandoning. Let them earn consistency. Let them reveal whether their pursuit contains courage or just loneliness. Because some avoidants do come back when they feel the distance, but not all of them come back transformed. Some come back because they miss regulation, not relationship. They miss the emotional supply, not the responsibility of intimacy. They miss your softness when their own emptiness gets loud, but they still cannot sustain closeness once they have it again. This is why you must watch patterns, not promises. The different avoidant does not just return because they are uncomfortable without you. They return changed in behavior. They initiate. They sustain contact. They tolerate emotional reality a little longer than before. They do not vanish every time tenderness appears. They let themselves stay. That is the word. Stay. Even when staying activates them. Even when feelings get messy. Even when the old wiring says, run. They stay more than they flee. And if they cannot do that, then no amount of chemistry will save what this is. You need to hear that with your whole body. Love is not proven by how tragic it feels. Love is proven by what it can hold. The wrong avoidant will make you feel like if you could just love them correctly, patiently, gently enough, they would finally choose you in full. But that belief is a seductive form of self-betrayal. It keeps your life paused at the altar of someone else's unfinished work. The different avoidant may still be unfinished, but they are participating. They are facing themselves. They are risking something. And most importantly, they are not asking you to pay for their healing with your self-respect. That is the line. So if you are watching this while thinking of one person, one silence, one almost relationship that still lives in your nervous system like an unsolved storm, I want you to ask a harder question than, do they care? Ask this instead. What happens when I stop carrying the entire emotional weight of this connection? Do they move toward me or disappear into comfort? Do they reflect or reset without accountability? Does my stillness make them braver or just absent? There is your answer. Not in the fantasy, not in the potential, not in the beautiful wound you keep calling destiny. In the pattern. Always in the pattern. And if the pattern tells you this is the wrong avoidant, then your healing will begin the moment you stop auditioning for a place in someone's defended heart. The moment you stop trying to be so lovable that another person finally becomes available. The moment you understand that your empathy is sacred, but it is not a license for self-erasure. You were not made to spend your life translating mixed signals into hope. You were not made to call anxiety intuition. You were not made to shrink your needs so someone else can feel less threatened by your love. You were not made to become emotionally fluent for two people. You were made for something steadier than this, something cleaner, something that does not require you to betray your body in order to keep the bond alive. And if this one is different, truly different, you will not have to destroy yourself to find out. Your power will not come from forcing a result. It will come from standing still long enough for the truth to reveal itself. That is real power. Not chasing, not convincing, not proving. Seeing, choosing, walking when necessary, remaining whole. Because the deepest shift is not that they finally chase you. The deepest shift is that you no longer need that to feel valuable. You no longer confuse being wanted with being cherished. You no longer mistake emotional inaccessibility for depth. You no longer hand your worth to silence and wait for it to speak your name. Now, if they come forward, they meet someone transformed. Someone whose nervous system is learning peace over pursuit. Someone whose love is no longer desperate to be selected. Someone who can feel deeply without collapsing. Someone who knows that self-worth is not loud, but it is immovable. And that is the identity shift that changes everything. You stop being the person who waits to be chosen by the emotionally unavailable. You become the person who watches behavior, trusts patterns, and chooses only what can meet you in the light. That is when your energy changes. That is when your standards stop being speeches and become reality. That is when your softness stops being a wound and becomes discernment. That is when even an avoidant can feel the difference in you. Because you are no longer reaching from hunger. You are standing in your own life. And from there, only what is real gets access.